Very good morning, and I'm privileged to have this opportunity to speak before this distinguished gathering. And what I'm going to speak today is about the pathology for this new science of psychology. And positive psychology, I'm saying, is one of part of it, as my job of talking about this new psychology or methodology of this new psychology was simplified or made easier by my preceding presenters who have talked about many of the things I had in mind to talk in this presentation. I think Professor Jaipur has very succinctly talked about what is positive psychology, and I think I would like to come back to this issue to clarify certain things, because positive psychology as a historical movement within the psychology has a short history, and how this movement has taken different shapes, how this movement has grown and progressed, and how we see it today. This is a kind of a historical journey which has been taken by psychology discipline. The term which we say positivism in the beginning was used by Comte as a new science, as a new way of thinking, as a new philosophy of science. And that was the philosophy, that was science which he thought that social sciences particularly can be as precise and exact as the natural sciences are, as the physics, astronomy and other physical sciences are. And the same way, that was the quest, that was the objectives which Comte has set for social sciences. And that was the mind that if we can use the methods of natural sciences and come up with the mathematical postulates, mathematical theories of human behavior and human mind, that was the goal of science. And I think the psychology which developed in the last 100 years or so has very systematically pursued this particular proposition of Comte. And that is how the positivism began as a movement within psychology. Positivism, as Comte has talked, and the positivism which has prevailed in psychology for almost 100 years, has nothing to do with the kind of positivism we are talking today. I think we have to be clear that the mode of positivism is very different. We are talking more in terms of the methodology, more in terms of the objectives of social and psychological sciences, which purpose was to reduce it to the biological or reductionistic level. The psychology which grew in the 50s and 60s, and so the word humanistic psychology which came up with work of Maslow and others, they have talked about this movement further and said that psychology should be focusing more on human strength, more on human potential, and in terms of the optimum experience and use of the potential. There was another movement which began 50s and 60s, which gave a new turn to the psychology, the development of psychology, though they never used the term positive psychology. The term positive psychology has a very short history. If you look, rather than I would say only maybe a decade or two, the first the issue on positive psychology by Seligman, Mihaly and other people who use this term positive psychology as a new movement in psychology. And that movement began with a special issue in his presidential address to American Psychological Association, and later on to a special issue which was brought by American psychologists in 2000. So that was the movement positive psychology by Mihaly and Seligman, which is not very old. And the whole idea of beginning this movement and was to shift the emphasis and the kind of research which was going on in psychology. And psychology to be more positive in the sense that looking at the human potential, looking at the hopes, expectations and all these kind of positive potential and the other human attributes. And that was the whole purpose of being this new movement, which is not very old. So that is how the positive psychology as we see today, internationally and in this country also, that was the kind of movement where we can that we should focus more on the positive side of the human being and about his potential and possibilities of the growth. And the fourth movement which I can take within this sequence is the development of within this country particularly and elsewhere is the development of what I call Indian psychology. And the movement of Indian psychology has given a new impetus, a new thrust to this whole movement of positive psychology. That my contention is that Indian psychology has been always, if you look at last 3,000 years, has been positive. And I think the kind of movement which has started in the West about positive psychology, we have been already doing this kind of psychology within the framework, in this country and this culture. So what we need to do is to go back to our tradition, to our heritage, and to our knowledge, which is of very positive orientation and focusing more on human strength, growth, and development. And that was my contention that when you look at from that point of view, I will be confining today. We can talk about several things in this matter. But my contention and my purpose of talking this is to look at the methodology, because no science can progress, no science can be without a methodology. Methodology is an integral part of any science. And in that sense, what has challenged, I would be coming back to the particular point that this positive psychology, the psychology which Comte began and it was reductionist in its orientation, that psychology was challenged by many other movements within psychology. And if you look historically, these movements were feminism, phenomenalism, humanism, then there was a postmodernism, social constructionism, and deconstructionism. These are some of the movements, very powerful movements which have begun in psychology in the last 30, 40 years. And these movements have seriously questioned and doubted that the kind of psychology which we are doing presently, the kind of psychology which we taught in the schools, in the universities and colleges, and the kind of research which we are doing, that was seriously questioned by these new movements within the psychology. I think as a student of psychology, we need to understand and read and appreciate more these movements and how these movements have changed the complexion of psychology today. Psychology today is not the same as the psychology which was there 50 years back. And the kind of new methodologies which have developed, the methodology of the positive science was a methodology primarily of experimentation. Conducting experiments, this is what the experimental method which has given the status of science to psychology. Because psychology has struggled almost for 100 years to acquire and attain the status of being a science, to be called a science. Another reason is that in terms of objectivity, in terms of applicability, in terms of validity, and in terms of testing, that this was the way when the science began that quest, then that provided psychology as a status of a science in last 100 years. But as I said, these movements which have questioned this particular perspective, and social constructionism, for example, another movement, has given new qualitative methods to psychology. Psychology was coming back to the qualitative approach, because in terms of measurement, in terms of that approach which the earlier sciences had, that approach was found questionable in many sense. How do we measure happiness of a particular person? How do I know how happy, how in terms of well-being, how do I know the well-being of a particular person? And there are certain questions, there are certain issues, and there are certain psychological conditions which are beyond any measurement. We can infer, we can conjecture, we can look at this, and I think this is one of the reasons that many qualitative methods have developed within the psychological research. And these qualitative methods are more in terms of not the positivistic approach, but these methods have developed within the constructionist and new development which have taken within the psychological, the realm of psychology. What I am trying to come that what these new methods are saying that we are conducting research on human beings. And we cannot conduct research on human beings in the same manner as we conduct research on inanimate objects. On things which are dead, which are not alive. Our physics can be research which is done in the area of research, physics, chemistry, and astronomy, other areas. Same way we cannot conduct research on the fellow beings. They are the same way, they are same people as we are. And this brought us a realization that the kind of orientation, the kind of training, the kind of background and the researcher has, that is going to affect the kind of research he or she is going to do, the data being collected, analyzed, and interpretation being made. Researcher is part of the research process. That he cannot or she cannot dissociate oneself from the research. Even because most of this research which is being conducted, these are conducted on the other person, not on the self. And when they are conducting on the other person and same using the same methodology as we have been using in physics and chemistry, that approach cannot work. There was a whole contention that if I am part of this, the data analysis and reporting and results are much more affected by who is the researcher. Their own biases, their own thinking, their own socialization is part of the research process. And there was also contention which is the new methods of research, these methodologies of research have brought in this kind of realization. I think this is also the realization which is always very much there if you talk within the Indian perspective. When we talk within the Indian psychology. Because when we talk about the Indian psychology, we talk about the two types of researches or two types of knowledge. One is the para and the other is apara. The knowledge of the self, the knowledge which is transcendental, the knowledge which is of the higher world or self, and the knowledge which is the knowledge of the world. And knowledge of other people's knowledge of the world we live in and the mind of world. So if you make that kind of dichotomy, if you try to understand that the knowledge about the self is as important as the knowledge about this world we live in. And that was one of the major contributions which was made by Indian psychology, that what we have to do is that for doing any research, we have to understand ourselves first. Unless we understand who we are, who is the person who is conducting research, no research, no data, no results, no conclusion can be very meaningful. And I think this is also the point which was made by many of the Indian thinkers, philosophers of the ancient times. From the ancient times, if you look at the scriptures, you look at the Vedas, Upanishads, and other scriptures, and you look at also the modern thinkers. You look at the Sri Aurobindo, the Krishnamurti, even Gandhi and other thinkers who have got this idea that we have to understand ourselves first. Do we have any right to change the other person? Do we have the right to change the world unless we know who we are, what we are doing, why we are doing it? So this knowledge of self is as important as the knowledge about the world. And unless we have both, we cannot live in this world. And I think what West has ignored, and all the psychology so far is ignored, is that the understanding and knowledge about the self. How do we understand and study the self? Because these kind of researches which we want to conduct on our own self needs a different kind of methodology. We can't use a methodology which we know, the kind of experimental method or questionnaire method or interview method which we are very familiar with. These methods we cannot use for studying our own self. I think I can make this point more clear by telling a small real event. There was Krishnamurti was lecturing all over the West about the how one should get rid of his past knowledge. So he says about baggage we carry with us, that baggage of knowledge is going to affect what we understand today. We only understand the present in the terms of the past. And there was a very eminent physicist, Phil Cabra, and he was attending his lectures very regularly, and he got into doubt that he wanted to be a scientist, a physicist, and a good physicist. And he said, I was doubting what Krishnamurti was saying, that you should get rid of freedom from the knowledge. What he was talking about, the term he was using was the freedom from the knowledge. And he said, if I put aside all the knowledge which I have accumulated so far, everything which I know is put aside, how do I do physics? How to do my research? And he was a real set of man, because he was understanding what Krishnamurti was saying, and he was he was finding a lot of sense in what he was saying. So he tried to arrange a meeting with Krishnamurti. He went to him and he said, this is the doubt which I have, and what should I do? And he said, he had written in a book, the unconventional wisdom, that within 2 minutes, the Krishnamurti cleared his all confusion. The whole idea is that, as far as a researcher particularly, he said, first you have to, as a human being, you have to understand yourself. Who are you? And why are you doing research? And what kind of background you come with? And what kind of knowledge you are using for conducting and doing research in the field? Once you understand yourself, and you have some idea about what you are, then if you go in the world and do physics or do any other kind of research, I think it's perfectly valid. And that is how the Indian psychology, I would say, has begun, that we have to take the methods which are both, the methods which are methods of understanding this world and the methods for understanding our own self. And that is how the new science of positive science, psychology should begin and prosper and progress. I can just show you giving you some flavor about the Indian methods of conducting research. That how for last so many thousand years and even in present time, the research which has been conducted on human beings, how kind of methods we use. These are some of the methods which we find in our scriptures, in our texts, and I have taken from very sources where the methods have been used for conducting research and conducting the knowledge. One is that we know is the pratyaksh, which is empirical, which is the what we call today is the empirical science, the science which is data based, the science which is positivism or positivistic psychology, as the Comte is talking about, and the kind of methodology which we have, what methodology which we have developed. The second is inference. Drawing inferences, as you can probably read, is the relationship between what is perceived and what is deduced. That we are trying to draw inferences, because all data says nothing. This proposition says that what is important is that what kind of inferences we draw from the data. That is much more important, and that the data does not speak. These are our own inferences which are important in this case. And the third method is the method of comparison. We see analogy, we see similarities, we see contrast, and this is how we understand many of the things. So these are the methods which are very systematically developed. I'm not going to in the detail here at this stage, but these are some of the methods which are very systematically developed, and these methods which can be used for conducting the research. The fourth is the postulation that we develop premises, and these premises, these theories are developed, on the basis of certain assumptions and suppositions. And if you look at the large number of theories which are developed even in the modern science and physics and chemistry, these methods have used this particular type of process. These developed in the beginning as postulates, as propositions. And propositions, even the whole Freudian theory developed as propositions, which are tested much later for its veracity, was verified and tested and developed much later. But this is one of the powerful methods of developing the knowledge. And the third is the Shabd Praman. And when we say Shabd Praman is the verbal testimony that knowledge which is acquired and developed by others, and by being in their presence, by talking to them, by the presence of teachers, because what teachers have, those who are expertise and experience and have worked in that particular area, what they say is also part of the knowledge. This was another way of acquiring knowledge, is to be learn it from the experts and teachers. And the last, which is most important, is the second is the non-cognition. What we mean that this is a powerful method of neti. By saying this is not this, this is not this, this is not this, and this is how one of the important methods that how do we come to know about something? By eliminating the possibilities. That it cannot, it is not this, this is not this, and then what is left is what the concept or the knowledge is. And the last, which is equally important, is the intuition. It's an intuitive method, that intuition, which is the knowledge which is not based on the sensory mind. The mind which is based on from seeing, observing, from other senses we develop this knowledge of our memory or our past experiences. This knowledge is intuitive in the sense that it is beyond our the known, whatever we already know, we come to know some. If you look at the theories of Einstein's theory of E is equal to mc square, he didn't know in the beginning from where this theory has come. Many of these ideas in science are intuitive, they just get the ideas, which is developed later on, which is developed in the full-fledged theories and which have been tested later on. So intuition, which is beyond the mind, the ideas and the knowledge which he gets, I think, and this is another method, which is powerful method, which has been used very frequently by one of the very eminent Indian thinker, Sri Aurobindo. And what are he develops this intuition we actually get is a method in the sense that how do we know about certain things, how do we know about ourselves, how do we know about the world, and which is something which is beyond any empirical evidence. And we get these ideas sometimes in the flesh, and many of these ideas, many eminent scientists have reported, have come in the flesh. And I think what he has tried to do is that how we can make intuition as a stable state of mind. How we can live in the state of intuition for a longer period of time. And that is how the way we look at the intuition as a powerful method of knowing. So what we are talking about the Aurobindo, that Aurobindo has done a very extensive exercise. He was, I would say, an experimentalist. He worked and did experiments for almost 7 or 8 years, and he wrote his very detailed notes of his experimentation, which runs into almost 1500 pages. I'm not going to think in that process, but what he says that methods of science, methods of knowing can be divided into 4 quadrants. Some of the research is on the basis of knowledge which is in which the researcher and the object of research are separate or not separate. So one is that they are rather divided, they are separate, or the researcher and the is not separate. Another is that the knowledge has come directly or knowledge has come indirectly. And based on these 2 aspects, he has divided all methods of knowledge in psychology or in other fields into these 4 quadrants. And if you look at the first quadrant, which is the knowledge of science, we can show it's knowledge which is direct, but knowledge which is separate, where researcher and the researcher, they are separate people. And in that sense, the knowledge of science, we can see the development in natural sciences, the kind of data-based research that can come in the first quadrant. And you look at the experiential knowledge, the phenomenological knowledge, that knowledge is that knowledge about one's own self, about other people, which is based on our personal experiences. And the third quality is the knowledge which is based on introspective method. Method of introspection has developed long back in psychology, and I think that was rejected when experimental method and other methods of science developed. And he's talking that kind of method which are based on looking into one's own self and knowing about oneself, which is the third quadrant. And the fourth is saying the knowledge which is intuitive in nature. Being one with the object. I think this is very, I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but this is the kind of method that which he developed, that how if we identify ourselves with the object. It's a complete identification with the object, with the person, with the object, then we come to know about the kind of knowledge we acquire is a different kind of knowledge. Anyway, these are the four different ways of looking at the knowledge which Sri Aurobindo has given this kind of classification. And I think lastly I will come to a kind of conclusion where we can divide the methods of science of positive psychology into four key different types of psychology methods. And these we can put it in the name. I would call these as methods of third person methodology, the second person methodology, and the first person methodology. Whole science of psychology which we know today and the kind of methods which we are using, whether it is experimental method, questionnaire method, interview method, or other kind of method, these methods we are conducting research on the other person. When I say third person, that is the other person. The researcher is one person, and the person whom we are studying or conducting research is called subject or respondent, but he is different. So that kind of separation of the researcher and the person who I research, that is the third person research. Most of the research in psychology which we know is third person research which is conducted on the other person. And I think most of the qualitative methods which have developed, these qualitative or quantitative methods, these methods come within this category, that research where experimental or researcher is different from the person on whom the research is being conducted. And then I am coming to the second person research. Second person research is there are some of the new techniques which are developing more recently. Research in which the researcher and the people who are and the other people are they are part of the whole group. So there is no distinction of researcher and research. People are joining together and they are conducting a kind of research, which is what we call developing as a participatory research. A kind of participatory research, a four of let us say 10 students sitting together and trying to find out which is the best method of learning or preparing for the examination. And these methods are very well developed by now, called cooperative inquiry, participatory method, which people sit to work together. They work together as a scientist, they work together as a subject, and they are conducting the research and experiment on themselves, and then trying to draw inferences, and then trying to tally and come to some kind of conclusions collectively. And these are the methods which we call the second person research, where there is no distinction between the researcher and the research, they work together. And the third category of methods, what we call is the first person research. The research we can conduct on ourselves. We are both the researcher as well as the object of research. And this is one of the very difficult propositions, and I think in the West, these are some of the methods which are developed significantly within Indian psychology. And this is a major contribution of the Indian psychology to the world psychology, that these kind of methods, whether these are intuitive methods or sakshi bhav. What is the witness consciousness? What I mean to say is sakshi bhav. Can I see myself? Can I observe myself from a distance? What is happening to me? What am I doing? What am I thinking? Can I observe my own thinking? Can I observe my own emotions? Can I understand what is happening within me? If you are looking at, these are the methods of, these are intuitive methods, or these are methods of mindfulness, intuitive methods, and other kind of methods, these are the methods which have been well developed. Some of these methods of yoga as a method of research, which is well developed in many ways, but I think these are one of the areas in which we have to work and see how we can conduct research on ourselves, how we can understand ourselves. We can understand the world, we know nothing about ourselves. And that is one of the proposition of the first person research. Anyway, I think I'll stop here, that what we need for this new positive psychology is the development, not in terms of concepts and not in terms of ideas, but also in terms of methods which can be used for the purpose of conducting research. Thank you.